people fell into classes on their own.
Yeah.
They weren't put there.
Right. So maybe to talk a little bit about that, I mean, I have no doubt that there must have been some very
But
poor.
everything depended on the dignity in which they held themselves.
Yeah, I have no doubt. I have no doubt about that.
And you had poor people in the community who were that way. They had nothing or very little, and they carried themselves with dignity, nobility.
I would imagine that that's true to this very day.
Probably.
But the opposite of that probably holds as well. That is to say, there may have been some people who were really very well-to-do who really did not keep themselves in a very dignified way.
And who will go nameless.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing that I thought we could talk a little about is the various pockets where people live.
Mm-hmm.
We spoke briefly about, John Jackson, places like that, but people lived further east around Sanford and Delaware and
That's central.
Yeah, I mean, I remember passing by there, even to this very day. Some of the streets are very pretty. They're wide, and I'm sure that had I come here 40, 50 years ago, there would have been Jewish families there. I don't know if any Jews would live, still live there today.
No, the homes were lovely homes in that area, around Delaware and Blake and St. Clair and Barnesdale Boulevard. They're magnificent homes.
Really?
Yes.
Is that where you live?
No.
Okay.
We lived on Cathcart Street.
Okay. So Aaron, why don't we start by just talking about work and how it is, how people supported themselves, what they did and where they did it.
Well, that's a broad question. I really don't know how to answer it. There was all kinds of work.
Right.
During the Depression, it was very difficult. But you had people who did have shops. There were a lot of hat stores in town. Ladies'
Really?
hats, yeah, at least 10.
Are you serious? I mean, so in other words, Curly, so-called, wasn't the only one.
I'm not talking about men's hats.
Oh, you're talking about ladies?
Ladies' hats, yes.
Who had hat stores? Do you remember?
Don't remember. Yeah, Sheila Walter's mother had a hat store. I can't think of the names.
Right.
What about fashion in general? Can you talk a little bit about the ladies and the men's fashion stores?
Yeah.
You ever owned?
Yeah. How nice to refer to them as fashion stores. Men's stores, there was Leon. His son runs it today.
Right.
There was Sam Lee's had a store, menswear store.
That's a Jewish store?
Lee's, L-E-E-S.
Yeah, that just folded a few years ago.
Well, the brothers died.
Oh, that would do it.
I'm speaking of their father.
I see.
And who else had menswear stores?
Lou Davidson?
Lou Davidson was already high fashion.
Right.
Yes, he was high fashion. There were two brothers Lees, Sam Lees and I can't think of the other one. He was on James Street, and Lees was on York Street, and then was on King Street when York Street was demolished.
What kind of a name is Lee's?
It's anglicized.
From?
I don't know. Like Leon was anglicized. You had a lot of people anglicize their names.
What about the ladies' stores?
Faye Jackson,
Who is owned by Peggy Snyder?
Rolfs, Minden's, Foster's,
Were these frequented by both Gentile and Jewish?
Yes. And there were stores on Ottawa Street. Max Gould had a menswear store. There were Jewish furriers around there. Nada's was one.
Nadal, right?
Nadal,
Yeah.
yeah. There were a few fur stores. Poulter on King Street West. I can't think fast enough
But
right
aside
now.
from, no, you've done exceptionally well, but aside from the fashion store, so-called, what other kinds of stores?
You had dry goods stores, you had linoleum stores, floor coverings.
Furniture?
Furniture was Ontario Furniture, your Uncle Phil.
Oh, really?
Yeah, my very good friend. And Barney had Ottawa Furniture,
Barney.
Rosenblatt, and Ernie Rosenblatt had Union Furniture. And you had the Adlers, had a couple of stores. Marvin Wasserman started off with the electrical fixtures, etc., and went into furniture. Liberty Furniture was Saul Eisenberg.
For whom did Albert Cohen work?
For Yawlis Home Outfitting,
Oh, they were down on
King Street,
King.
opposite Mary Street. I worked there with Albert. It was a rip-roaring good time.
Well, I should hope so.
So would you describe Hamilton, the Jewish community in those days, as a vibrant, flourishing community?
I think so. Well, from my perspective, it was. I'm still trying to think more furniture stores, but I can't. Home Outfitting was owned by the Yawlis family.
We spoke once before about restaurants in town, the delis, and
Yeah, we spoke about the delis. After the war, Mrs. Vine opened up a kosher restaurant. And for a short while, one of the Leuchters from the butcher shop had a restaurant on James Street North near Gore Street, which is now Wilson Street.
a kosher restaurant.
Yeah. They didn't last long.
No.
Mrs. Vine was there for a few years on York Street.
Aaron, were you very involved in the Jewish Community Center on Delaware Avenue?
On the periphery. I mean, if there are things to be done, like backdrops and stuff like that, I volunteered. But I wasn't in the foreground.
So to speak to someone who was very involved in that, they'd have to be a little bit younger?
No,
It was just what?
they don't have to be younger. They were just more involved.
You know what I'd like you to speak about, maybe if you could, if you don't mind, Billy? That whole era when Rabbi Green decided to start the Hamilton Hebrew Academy and the kerfuffle that it created, what was the status quo at that time, and why was that such a revolutionary action?
We had a Talmud Torah established in 1911 by Rabbi Levine. The Talmud Torah was an afternoon school, and when Rabbi Green came here and he had a child,
What year were we talking about?
1959, 1960. he felt it was very important that we have a day school. The day school movement was now taking hold in the United States. They had day schools for years, but in the late 50s and early 60s, it became de rigueur. Everybody not everyone, but many people want to send their kids to a day school. The board of the Talmud Torah was vehemently opposed.
Why?
I don't know why. It wasn't from a religious standpoint, I'm sure. Even the rabbis were opposed to Rabbi Green. People took very strong stand. They felt that he was breaking up the community by doing that, because the Talmud Torah sort of encompassed the entire community, whereas a day school wouldn't have that effect. There were some who felt that it was segregating the kids from Gentiles and sort of ghettoizing them. Their reasoning in retrospect was really wrong. I think everyone was out to save their own egos. And the school was established in, I think, 61 it was founded.
Did it have anything to
61, 62.
do with the fact that it was going to be an Orthodox?
No, I
don't.
don't recall that at all. No, don't forget, Beth Jacob had just turned conservative. And the temple, it didn't matter to them because they weren't interested in this type of...
But at the time, there was no temple or Beth Jacob religious school. All the kids, no matter if they went to the temple, Beth Jacob, or the Addis at that time, were going to the one Talmud Torah.
The temple had their own school.
Okay, so they always had their own system.
Pretty well. Pretty well. Addis Israel had an afternoon school. And we had a Sunday school as well.
What, the Addis Israel?
Yes, I was principal there. And I was a teacher at the Beth Jacobs school.
Well, wait, was there also a Talmud Torah then? Or what was this like? How did that work?
The Talmud Torah, yes, there was a Talmud Torah then.
So you're describing that there already were.
Sunday schools I'm speaking of right now.
There were 3 different Sunday schools.
Yes.
Well, if the Addis serviced the Addis kids and the Beth Jacob serviced the Beth Jacob kids, why did you need a Talmud Torah?
It's difficult trying to get into the kids' heads 5 days a week. How much do you think they could learn in 1 day a week? Not even a full day, a couple of hours.
So the Talmud Torah was more than just a Sunday school.
More?
Than just a Sunday.
Yes, of course.
What else would they learn at the Talmud Torah?
They would learn how to daven, how to read and write. They would get a smattering of Jewish history.
Well, how often did the Talmud Torah meet?
3 days a week, I think.
3 afternoons a week.
Yes.
I see.
So then Rabbi Green came in and started the Hamilton Hebrew Academy. How did that impact on the community?
Splintered it.
In what way?
There were those who were very much for it, and there was a majority opposed. But he forged ahead, and it's all history.
So when you say it splintered it, in what way did it, like how did that
Because
manifest?
people were very, very much opposed, and that was people in the Addis Israel too. They felt it would be a drain on the membership, which it was, and they didn't want they were quite satisfied with the education they were getting for their children at the Talmudtorah on Delaware Avenue. Prior to that, John Street.
When you say, excuse me, that it would be a drain on the membership, you mean financially?
Yes.
People couldn't afford to do both. Or
People were reluctant, but you had Rabbi Green was able to secure a hard core of people from amongst the Holocaust survivors, those who wished to carry on their tradition and have their children involved. Native-born people was very difficult. He had to meet with each and every prospective parent.
Sure.
And try and persuade them.
When did the Hamilton Hebrew Academy start to become more mainstream, the way it is today?
I think it always was.
It always attracted children, not necessarily from observant families?
Oh, definitely.
Why do you think they were attracted to go there?
I wouldn't say the children were attractive, the parents were.
What do you think was
because the parents wanted to see continuity. They wanted to see, especially the Holocaust survivors, those who who were members of the shul, wanted their children to know about their background,
Sure.
their history.
Sure.
And a number of those children, although the parents were not observant, the children became observant, some of them.
Can we maybe talk a little bit about, first of all, was there anything else about work that we should have spoken about? Like, for example, we know that there were people in the scrap business.
Called peddlers.
Yeah.
Scrap peddlers.
Do you recall the early days when the peddlers used to come by and deliver or pick up people's household scrap?
I remember a number of them with a horse and wagon. My grandfather, one of them. There was Zurich Shiffman, the Waxmans, all of them. Mr. Chapnick. They could have formed a union, actually.
Were they competitors with each other? How was the community able to support so many scrap peddlers?
Well, they didn't deal with Jews. They dealt mainly with non-Jews. My father would go with his truck. He never worked in town doing that. He did that in the winter. He would go to Caledonia, Jarvis, Simcoe, all the farm people, and pick up old plows and iron, things like that.
And then sell it to?
In his case, I think he sold mostly to Levitt's at the corner of Bay and Cannon.
What were Levitt's? A broker?
No, Levitt family had a yard.
Are any of their children still in town?
Sure. Edie Feldman.
When
Her brother, yeah.
when you say that
Les Levitt.
people had horses, you remember people with horses.
Certainly, we had a horse.
And was this the time when horses understood Yiddish?
I presume so. The dog certainly understood Yiddish.
I'm sure. And in the shtetl there may have been cows.
No, we didn't have any cows in town.
Where did you
not
keep your
here.
horse?
We had a stable in the back of the house.
Was that common?
Yes.
People would have stables in the back of their house.
Yes, and I would go in there and feed the horse
On
sometimes
Cathcart?
on Cathcart Street, and sometimes I'd go riding him bareback.
Where, around the backyard?
Yeah,
This was the horse that your father would use,
grandfather.
grandfather would use to pick up
Yeah,
crap.
yeah. It was fun.
Were there lots of horses in the neighborhood? Like, did everyone have a horse in their backyard?
No, only if they were in that type of cartage business or in picking up that or fruit.